Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey David, how you doing today?
Good. I had to change locations for the podcast
Oh,
because my wife is a lawyer. She's working from home, and my son's working schoolwork from home, and it was too noisy in my kitchen where I usually do it. So I've gone, Bruce, people have been thinking that Bruce McCurdy, he's a learned man with all those books behind him.
hmm.
So I had to do the same.
I've been meaning to say I think I started a trend, because every time I look at the TV news, they're interviewing some person from their home, and they always seem to be standing in front of their library of books, and it seems to be. I guess it just caught on, eh?
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's a big trend. So I guess
hmm.
everyone wants to look like they're well read. And
Yeah. Well, look closely and see how many of those books move from one podcast to the next.
I used to be a huge reader of
Yeah,
books
me
in the
too.
last decade. Not so much, not since Twitter and the internet and
The internet.
the new
Hmm.
information age. I listen to books
Yeah, I know you
uh,
do.
on Audible, um, and I've heard of a couple great ones recently. But anyway, let's get at it, Bruce. Feels
Sure.
good today, Bruce. It feels great today because the NHL. We're starting to hear really interesting rumblings about the NHL season resuming. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Oilers' PK, which I'm digging into in a series of posts. We're going to talk about Dave Tippett and his coaching strategy. But let's start with this news about what might happen. And it's funny where it came from because it's all started with a hockey writer or a sportscaster I've never heard before, Andy Slater of Fox. No, just wait. It's not him. Yeah. Yeah. Andy Slater of Fox Sports Atlanta. These are how unfamiliar the names are. He was interviewing Florida Panthers president Matt Caldwell, who I've never heard of either. And Caldwell was talking about the season resuming in, getting going, the players getting moving in June and skating playoffs start in July. And I'll read you the quote. And this was transcribed by Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, and who's done a good story on it. You should go read Greg's story. It's the
Yeah.
best story out there right now, sums it all up. And on the Slater's radio show, here's what Caldwell says. The players right now are all quarantined. I know for the NHL, our players are quarantined through the end of April, and that will probably be extended into May. But when we are able to come out of the quarantine period, players are going to need time to work out. I think all the leagues are thinking about this some training camp that we would do before the start of the season. So that's going to take us into the June timeframe. At least with the NHL, we're trying to target sometime in July. When we feel that the players are safe, when we have enough testing and we have enough ways to get back on the ice, for us, it's probably going to be contained at playing at 4 or 5 neutral sites. So all that's being discussed right now. My guess is that we would start with limited fans or empty arenas. So just with the teams and the associated staffs. And that was followed up by Emily Kaplan and Wyshynski, who did some reporting, and they named some favorite sites, Bruce,
Hmm.
including Raleigh, North Carolina, Minnesota,
Right.
Minneapolis, and Edmonton. Edmonton, Bruce, Edmonton. It's a little less exciting than it might be because fans won't be able to attend. And of course,
Right.
this is all uncertain. This is still all speculation, and there's a lot has to check out first. A lot has to be done. This may not happen, although I've been predicting for some time
I know you
that
have.
this will happen. This is going to happen. And I'm just saying this because I've been following the pandemic news.
I know
We
you have.
already have American states opening up. We're going to see how that goes. We have Germany opening up. So they're not all crazy right wing Republican American states that are opening up, like Texas and Florida and so on, such and such. It's Germany. Sober Germany is opening up. They're climbing down. They're the cat in the tree. They're climbing down from the tree, and they're going to face the barking dog on the ground, and we'll see how that goes. So Germany's opening up. This is in May.
Hmm.
Um, I expect some Canadian jurisdictions are going to start to lift restrictions in May and June as well. And we also know in the summertime, some scientists speculate because this is a coronavirus, it's like a cold virus, but it's far
Right.
more lethal. Um, more infectious perhaps as well than the regular cold virus. That these viruses tend to go away in the summer as well. But I don't think that you'll have normal playoffs if the coronavirus, this virus goes away in the summer, because there's too much risk of the players getting the disease themselves and then having to quarantine them and the whole team. So I think that they're looking for situations like in Edmonton at the Marriott Hotel,
Right.
where you can quarantine 4 teams. There's food services. There's a gym at the Marriott. I think it's Simon Bennett's gym. I can't remember what it's called right now. There's the Oilers training facilities. There's first class facilities at there. There's 2 rinks, and I think we're going to see this in Edmonton. Is my bet. What's your take?
Well, my initial reaction hearing this coming out of Florida was if they want to play hockey in an empty arena, they could do what better than to play in Florida. I mean, they've been practicing social distancing in that arena for as long as they've had a team. Seriously, I heard John Shannon on Bob Stauffer's show. He was the guest after you in your fine segment today on Oilers Now. And he said they moved beyond, as far as he knows, they moved beyond the true neutral site data options like North Dakota that you and I discussed at one time. And there was another American state. He said it was a logistical issue with, just the hotels, the security, not everything sort of linked together the way you have this sort of optimal arrangement in downtown Edmonton with the hotel right there, owned by Kate's Ice District. Like there's a real sort of potentially contained community there with pedways and relatively easy, I would think, to secure from the outside, and only have authorized personnel on the inside. So I think Edmonton has got a pretty good crack at it. That said, it doesn't fit my idea of a neutral site unless they're deciding they're going to make the Oilers go somewhere else while they bring in teams from the East or something. But that wouldn't make any sense either. And honestly, as you say, without the fans, the home ice advantage would be diminished. It wouldn't be zero, but it would be, you have the intimate knowledge of the rink and so on, but it would be much diminished without the fan feedback that often stimulates the home team.
Just tweeting out the story here. I think, we'll see what happens. As good as we can say for now. But they have to open up the borders. They'd have to get the local, Dr. Dina Hinshaw and the Premier will both have to sign off on this. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll hear from Jason Kenney today on this. We'll see. There's a press conference today.
Oh, yeah.
And this is big news. The Oilers would have the advantage of I wonder if some of the players could still live. I think some of them live at the Marriott Hotel above. They probably couldn't stay in their own homes, though. They probably have to all go into quarantine, into the lockdown, right, because you just can't take that risk of one player getting sick. And then, because the rule going forward, if we're anything like Taiwan, right? And so far we have followed a strict approach like Taiwan in Alberta, at least. Mm-hmm. What they do is if you get sick, you're in mandatory 14-day quarantine, and everyone is in mandatory 14-day quarantine. And that's how they've had just minuscule number of deaths and minuscule number of cases. So if we follow that model, and many jurisdictions are kind of leaning in that direction, and we have been doing, that's what we would do as well. So you couldn't have the players in anything but quarantine.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a tall ask, especially if you're talking about a playoff run that might be, several weeks. We won't say the full 2 months like a normal year, 2+ months, because I suspect they'll tighten it up somehow. But it would be weeks, and you're talking about some kind of preparation period and probably a few regular season games, and then some kind of playoff run. So, however they do it, it will be. It'll need a huge commitment and sacrifice from the players, and really from all of the staff and so on, from the the rink attendants to the equipment manager to the, the video crew to the TV people and on it goes. It's just a huge list. The more I think about it, the more classes of service people that make the game happen. The officials, the minor officials, and on it goes. It's a long list, and I had a little exchange with Steve Lansky of Big Mouth Sports, who of course was a Hockey Night in Canada producer for a number of years, and I asked him about the TV aspect, and Steve said that I asked if it was maybe 200 people that they would need to pull off a hockey game, including all essential personnel. Yeah, he thought 200 was a pretty reasonable estimate, and that's for one game with two teams, right?
That's interesting. The TV crew might not necessarily have to be in quarantine. Like if they have no contact with the players, then the TV crew wouldn't have to be in that kind of tight lockdown. And if someone got sick, well, then you'd move them out and other people would come into work, just like any other work situation is going to be going forward, just like it is right now for the work situations which are going on.
Right.
So, I don't know if you'd have to have all of those 200 people in quarantine. I wonder, could they play every night, Bruce?
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
The other thing you said that was interesting to me was that some aspects would be streamlined. Like he said, normally they come into a rink and they have to set everything up to do a broadcast, and then they tear everything down. And he said those people, they'd only really have to set it up once, and then it would only be maintenance, right? Because they'd be set and ready to roll. The whole thing would be programmed and set up for TV. And once they had their cameras in place and all the wiring and everything else, however they do it these days, that would be more of a one-off job as opposed to each and every game. It's like it'd be like Celine Dion doing all of her concerts in Las Vegas as opposed to moving around and going to Edmonton one night, Calgary the next night, and so on, where they're always tearing up and tearing down and setting up, and that would be, so some of that stuff would be streamlined out of it, but he still figured around 200 folks.
Whew. Wouldn't have guessed that many, but there you go. And so Vegas is apparently one of the teams in the running, so it's kind of scary, but
they're going to get basketball.
I don't think this is gonna. I don't see Vegas being a competitor for Edmonton. I don't know what kind of low caseload they have there. That said, it doesn't really, on some level, it matters how big the spread is in your community. But if everyone's in quarantine, it doesn't. But what if half the people involved in it are and half aren't? Then you really do need to be in a community where there's low community spread of the virus, and that would favor Edmonton. But I can't say if Vegas has low community spread or not. I'm guessing that they don't, just because of the amount of international travel there, that their numbers are higher, but I don't know about that. But I'm an Edmonton homer, so of course I'm going to say they'll play here in Edmonton. And the funny thing was, he said limited fans. So what are they going to say? Okay, we're going to have it's going to cost you $50,000, but you got the whole section to yourself. Just so there'll be 16. I don't know how many sections in the downtown arena. There's probably 30. Just 30 people. In theory, again, if there's no contact with the players and they're far enough away, like there's a quarantine zone around the ice, you could have some amount of fans going. You line up on the dots, but I don't think that's happening. I don't think there's going to be any fans, because that really would be a hometown advantage for because one Oiler fan's worth about 50 fans from any other city.
Yeah, you're introducing layers of complexity and risk there that I just don't see them doing. I just don't see it.
Me neither. They're going to keep it. This would definitely be the KISS principle would be in place here, Bruce, because keeping it simple, stupid is the only way to go, man. There's so many things that could go haywire, and you can't afford. Again, I don't think you can afford to have one player get sick. So we'll see what happens. No sneaking out at night. And Kurt actually mentioned July when we last talked as the date. So he was hearing something about July. I was thinking it might be a little earlier, but I'll take July. And you know what? I really do think, Bruce, like my wife, she's not a huge hockey fan. She doesn't barely watch the games. But when she heard this, she was so excited. And I just think if this can happen, it will be. I know it'll be. I'll feel a huge pick me up and a huge
Right.
boost, and like we are getting on with things in the face of a really hard times. We're finding a way to get on with things, and that's what's got to happen. So I like it. Let's talk. Are we done with that? Want to talk
Well,
PK? Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say about Gary Bettman saying, we're fully prepared to play hockey in the summer. And I'm saying, well, you gave out the Stanley Cup on June 20th one year, which is like one day before the summer solstice. So it's not much of a stretch. But I think starting it in the summer or starting it up again, obviously, that's a huge break from tradition.
That's your mandatory Gary Bettman shot of the podcast. I'm just noticing it now. You often do take shots at Gary Bettman, and I'm not. I'm saying that's fine. That's fine. But you got a couple. You're there's some things he's done, especially with that loser
I,
point.
I,
You do not like.
oh, I detest the loser point. I think the whole system is broken because of that thing. And I had a long-standing grudge of Bettman coming in and awarding franchise after franchise south of 40 degrees latitude. Um, he does, there are things that he does that I respect. And one of the things that he's done is he's actually taken the heat that he takes where he gets booed every time he comes out to present the Stanley Cup, even to the home team. Uh, he's actually taken and turned that to his advantage with a little bit of self-deprecating humor, which I appreciate in any human. So I'll give him a point for that. Uh, he's not my favorite, but I'm a rail against authority type person anyway, as you know. So
He's a cold-eyed,
yeah,
alligator-blooded businessman,
yep.
and as cool and calculated as they get. And it's funny, Bruce. I remember during the arena debate, and you don't have to tell me which side you took. I still don't know to this day. I think people know what side I was on. I was arguing strenuously for this, and one of the arguments I made was like, with the 1990s firmly in mind, is we need a new arena to secure the future of the Oilers in Edmonton. And I said, this was in 2013, and we were booming in 2012. People were saying, what are you talking about? Like, we don't need that. I said, times could change. Things could happen. This city might not always boom again. And we might be in a situation where the Oilers really will have, because the teams that lost their arenas in the 1990s all had old arenas. And that was a huge problem. The fact that we had renovated our arena was one of the reasons we kept our arena. So one of the arguments I was making that this was good for Edmonton was that times could actually change and we need to secure this team in this city. So that's
Well,
all I'm
Edmonton's
saying.
in a very different position than Calgary as of this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
yeah. What are the prospects now that in this economy, with the way things are going to go, that, I mean, there's no way. Let's, maybe the billionaires still have their billions and they're just going to have to put a lot more money into it. And that's, to give people credit in Edmonton who didn't want the funding. I completely uh, agree, understand the argument of you don't want to subsidize a billionaire and millionaire players. That is a good point. I don't disagree with it. Fair enough. And I'll leave it at that. Bruce, let's talk about Dave
hockey,
Tippett. Let's talk about the Oilers getting ready for the playoffs, man.
sure.
All right, what do they got going on the first two lines, and what do you
Well,
expect to see?
I've been writing about Dave Tippett. First two parts, I've really been diving deep into first Ken Holland and now a little bit more Dave Tippett. Because they're new this year and because we have our first chance to see up close these veteran successful management coaching types. So it's fun to watch them operate and see how they do business. So in part one, I wrote about the great performance on special teams, which we talked about the power play before, and I think we'll talk about the penalty kill in a bit. So I won't go there other than to say that's what's kept the team afloat all year. Um, but last night I wrote about a specific turning point in the season, and in one sense it was pretty obvious, but obvious enough that it deserved a little further scrutiny. And that was the right after the Christmas roster freeze, when Holland sent out Marcus Granlund and called up Kyler Yamamoto, and really gave first chance to a young forward all year. And at the same time, Dave Tippett reloaded and rebooted his forward lines by deciding to break up the deadly duo of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, who were ripping it up scoring wise, but who were getting ripped up uh, goals against wise. And in fact, at that point, were giving up more than they were getting. And the worst part still was with those two guys playing on one line, it left a lot of minutes in the game where both guys were on the bench and the rest of the team was underwater. So uh, Tippett made the crucial decision New Year's Eve to take Draisaitl off of the McDavid line, move him into the middle of the ice, and give him his own line in the same position. Both players playing their position of strength, and basically realigning the what I call the McDavid Draisaitl axis from a horizontal to a vertical axis. You start with one, then the other comes over the boards after, as opposed to other teams dealing with both at once, putting out their top two defensemen, their best checking center, and trying to withstand it and kill them on the counterattack. It created bigger matchup problems for the other team. It created better matchups for, I'd say, Draisaitl in particular. And the creative thing of what Tippett did in my mind was all year he had Nuge playing second line center and Draisaitl playing left wing, and yet when he put them on the same line, he switched them, and he put Draisaitl into the middle and Nuge out to the wing, and I think that played into the strengths of both players, especially I would say defensively. I'd say Nugent Hopkins was having some issues in the 3-on-3 down low part of the game, but he is very, very good on the back check, on the stick lift, on the steal, on the create the turnover and puck going the other way, and he does that well from the wing. And Leon, Tippett just basically gave him the whole ice and said, "We want you in the middle of the ice. We want you in the middle of things, making things happen." And he credited Draisaitl for doing a lot of work on the defensive side of his game and improving. And from the moment that line was put together, which was actually January 2nd in Buffalo, where they moved Nugent Hopkins up to play with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, they were absolute dynamite. They were scoring over 4 goals per 60 minutes together and allowing only 2. So they were basically doubling the other team in scoring. And it created a little bit of complexity, let's call it, on the McDavid line. And that McDavid got Cassian and James Neal were his nominal wingers. And you're saying, okay, well, that's pretty good. He's got his same right winger, and he's got this big scoring veteran on the left side. But both Cassian and Neal were kind of hitting the skids at that point of the season. And then everybody ran into issues that caused them to miss games. Cassian got suspended twice, 9 games. Neal got hurt, missed 16 games. McDavid himself got hurt, missed 7 games. So there was a lot of sort of flux on that line. But still, anytime McDavid was playing, the other team had to respect that he was out there. They would generally use their top defense pair against McDavid. And his line just really broke even. I think 19-4, 18 against over the span of games, the last 30 games. But the Draisaitl line outscored by a lot. And then the third and fourth lines, they got outscored. They've been outscored all year. They've been scoring under 40% of the goals when they're on the ice. But their ice time was cut down by a significant amount by the, only being the bottom 6 instead of the bottom 9. That makes a huge difference. And so the Draisaitl line did more outscoring than the depth players got outscored. And the Oilers were actually +4 at 5-on-5 in that stretch, and they kept killing it on both special teams. So they became basically an elite team in those 30-game run. They won 17, lost 8, and got extra point in 5. So a very good record over that span. And they went from outside looking in of a playoff berth to being firmly ensconced in a very good position as the season was about to wind down.
Yeah, I think Nugent Hopkins, Bruce. Like, I know there's been I think it's a small faction of fans. There's a small faction of fans who believe anything. There's a small faction of Oiler fans who believes that Elvis lives, But there is a sizable faction of Oiler fans who believe and have always believed Nugent Hopkins is a better player than Leon Draisaitl and a better center. And I really like Ryan Nugent Hopkins' game, but
Yep.
man, it's been apparent for a long time that Leon Draisaitl is a superior player than Ryan Nugent Hopkins, and it's not close. And it's just, and one of the ways it's not close is the ability to advance the puck out of the defensive zone and win battles in the defensive zone. They both tend to be puck watchers a bit in the defensive slot. They'll both focus too much on the puck, like all offensive players do, and let someone slip in behind them and score a goal or get off a grade A shot. They're both prone to that. But Nuge is too. For a smart hockey player, Nuge has frustrated me over the years with that tendency. And I still don't get it, but I just take it as he's a kid who grew up with a puck on his stick.
Right.
And man, it is hard to get out of that orientation. And of course, Draisaitl is the same way. But Draisaitl is a much better player in terms of winning battles down low and then controlling the puck and single-handedly protecting it and either skating it out himself or passing it out. He is unparalleled for an Oilers forward in terms of that skill. So when he wants to ramp it up as a defensive center, I mean, when he wants to be a two-way player, he's the best two-way player on the Oilers right now because of that. I think his defense is stronger than Connor McDavid's defense when they're both playing at their peak level. McDavid's offense is higher than Draisaitl's. But I love that move in that regard. So one other thing, talking to Bob Stauffer today, Gaetan Haas. I got strong spider feelings there, Bruce. I don't know if you were listening to the conversation. I got strong spidey feelings that the Oilers are going to re-sign Gaetan Haas here. Did you feel the same way? And I'm okay with that. I don't think he had a great year, but I'm okay with it. What's your take?
Well, I identified him all along as being kind of a bubble player that is replaceable, but might not be replaced. You know, sure, they could find a better guy, but as Bob said, I mean, you look at the list of potential free agent, especially if you're honing in on a right shot center. I mean, Ryan Strome is no longer available, right? Thanks.
Did he just sign?
Well, no, but he's
Isn't
not.
he UFA?
He's RFA.
Oh,
that was the genius of the contract that Chiarelli signed him to, and then he went and dumped him 20 games later.
That's one of the ones that really makes you angry.
That trade, just crazy. Anyway, there's no Ryan Stromes out there. Like, we actually had a solution for our 3C, right shot 3C. Yeah, that was a real good solution at a reasonable price.
But Bruce, come on. Ryan Spooner, man. Ryan Spooner, come on.
Yeah. Anyway, it's... Yeah, well, I'm not going to put that one on Gary Bettman. That was just a dumb trade. But there's not that many right shots. If you don't care about right shot, obviously there's more options. There's more left shooters. But I mean, you could go out and hire, a known commodity, an experienced guy like Steve Tambolini once did with Eric Belanger. And that doesn't necessarily work out either. With Gaetan Haas, where is the ceiling? I've seen a lot of games where he was what I would call ineffectual. Didn't really make a whole lot happen. Didn't really get burned a whole lot. Had a hell of a lot of try, a lot of speed, got knocked off his feet a lot, lost a lot of battles. There's like pluses and minuses about the guy. And he scored, 10 points? So low-level scoring, but, if they finished out the season, he wouldn't even get to 15 points. Ideally, you want forwards that are close to 20 points, even at the bottom of your roster. And he wasn't there. How much was he learning? Like, to me, when I looked at Joachim Nygaard, I saw a player who I thought was improving quite steeply up the curve just before he got hurt. And that injury was very unfortunate and turned out to be quite a bad one. But he'd already shown enough that while he was hurt, they signed him to another 1-year extension, which I haven't done yet with Haas. So it tells me, what I see is Holland prioritizing, saying, well, I want to get Archibald, then we'll worry about Sheahan. I want to get Nygaard, then I'm going to worry about Haas and players of that class. So he may be in limbo for a little while, but it wouldn't shock me if they did give him another 1 year. And it wouldn't disappoint me particularly. I like the guy. He's kind of fun to watch, but he's not a difference maker.
Yeah, like my concern with him, there's a couple. He didn't seem to improve appreciably from the start of the season to the end. Fair comment. He fell down a ton.
Yes.
Especially, I thought as the season went on, it was like Puljujärvi-itis, where he was falling down all the time. And God bless Jesse Puljujärvi. I've been a huge fan of him, but man, he fell down a lot. And I thought it might, in the end, like with the hips, maybe it was the hip problem. But that last season, so Haas, he was willing to engage. He was not able to win puck battles. Tippett
Hmm.
didn't trust him on the PK. That was another big concerning factor. Because if you're going to be a bottom line forward,
Yep.
but the plus factors, the guy is fast. He's super fast. Jujhar Khaira is not an NHL center. He will never be. I shouldn't say that. Like I doubt he will be an NHL center. I just don't see the awareness and the ability with the puck for him to be an NHL center. So they need another NHL center. If Gaetan Haas is your 13th forward, you could do worse than Gaetan Haas is your 13th forward, Bruce, and I or your 14th forward. So I'm okay if they sign him. And the point that Bob Stauffer made a couple times was that this was his first year in North America.
Yes.
Maybe give him another year. Let's see how it goes. And how often does that work out? Never. Well, sometimes it works out. Sometimes does it ever work out?
Once in a while. Yeah, once in a while.
Can you think of? I can't.
Some of these,
Yeah, I'm sure it
I,
does. I'm sure it does.
I'd have to scrape the memory banks, but some of these guys, I mean, you're talking if you're talking about the subcategory of guys that came over and it took them a year to establish himself, and then by the second year they got good. I'll put out the name of Jan Heda, who came to Edmonton,
He was
played
good though
for
in
a
his
year,
first year.
showed some stuff. Not enough. They let him go, and he became a pretty strong player for other teams
Huge.
after.
Listen, man.
Oh,
Huge mistake. I was a huge Jan Heda fan. That first year, you could see the guy could play. I don't think
yeah,
he wanted to come back to Edmonton was the problem. Like I think that
probably
was his
not.
decision. Yeah, he was an NHL player right from the get go.
Okay.
So
That,
yeah, maybe I'm sure there's a small list of players. Maybe we can look it up if they resign him, and we can do that. Could be the theme of whoever does the post. That could be what we could look at
that,
is guys who had that breakthrough in their second year. I don't know.
yeah, like mid-20s European forwards who didn't impress first year and then came on. Yeah, you'd be able to single out a few, I think, but it'd be a fairly small sampling of players to begin with. So that'd be fun.
Alrighty, the PK, Bruce.
Hmm.
So the PK, I did a little bit of a historical look at the PK,
Read
and
that.
that's all I've done so far. It was a fairly concise post. You could be charitable and say that not a long post. It was a
Set
dive,
set the set the stage.
set the stage. Let me just find the data that I. It took me a while to make this chart, though. I will say later, a long time. PK. So the Oilers' PK last year, Bruce, was the second worst in the NHL. This year, it was the second best. It was last year the worst PK in Oilers team history. This year, it is the second best penalty kill in Oilers team history. That is a dramatic, remarkable, unbelievable change in fortunes for the PK. And I haven't looked into it enough to have theories myself on it. I just really wanted to put it into context. Now, I should say when I was doing these rankings, Bruce, I didn't go by PK percentage. If you just go by PK percentage, you get the PKs in the early 2000s being the best PKs. And I initially was writing a post based on that. Like I was looking who was on the
Hmm.
PK Marchand and, about to, and I didn't really remember that PK being particularly good. And I was thinking, wasn't that
Oh, I
PK
do.
with Curry and Tikkanen way better than that Marchand PK? So I was almost on the post and that popped in my head. Weren't
Mhm.
they the best? So instead of doing it by PK percentage, I went by ranking in the NHL
Right.
that season. And if you do it that way, which I think is the best way to do it, I
Hmm.
I think it's the superior way to actually rank PKs because PK percentage change. If it's easier to score goals in the NHL like it was in the 80s, everyone's going to have a lower PK percentage. They're going to kill off fewer penalty kills. And if it's a dead puck era, like it was in the early 2000s, you're going to have higher penalty kill percentages. And I'm going to re-rank the power plays based on this, by the way, because
Hmm.
but So what I found was, if you rank it where they rank in the NHL, the best power play the Oilers have ever PK the Oilers have ever had was the 1988-1989 Edmonton Oilers PK featuring Tikkanen and Curry as their two main players. We don't have time on ice from that era, but McTavish was on that
Unfortunately.
PK. Messier was on that PK. Kevin Lowe, Charlie Huddy, Randy Gregg was on that PK. And we're kind of left guessing somewhat after that because I don't remember if Glenn Anderson was still a penalty killer at that point or not. But that 1988-1989 PK was the number one ranked PK in the NHL. It's the only time the Oilers have ever had that. And by the 1990 playoffs, that PK was only okay in 1989-90, but in the playoffs, Bruce, my recollection of it was I've never seen penalty killing that good in my life. Then Jari Kurri, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, and Jari Kurri and Esa Tikkanen working in tandem to cut off passing lane, block shots, smother players, forecheck the hell out of them. They hardly got in the Oilers zone when they were out there. And when they did, they hardly kept it in. Because those two penalty killers together were the two best forward penalty killers I've ever seen working together in my life. And turned out they were the number one PK. This one, second. Shan and Archibald, good work. So what do you say? Why was this power PK so much better?
Well, first of all, I'm going to put a slightly different slant on it. We're looking at PK percentage kill rate,
Yeah.
and NHL.com keeps track of that, and that's sort of their default go-to. The best team is the team that kills off the highest percentage of penalty kills. But on their actual penalty kill stat page, they have net PK percentage, which includes shorthanded goals minus goals against. So it's always going to be negative. They're always going to give up more power play goals than shorthanded goals. But those Oilers of the 80s, and not just that 88-89 team, but the ones before that, the Gretzky teams. I mean, I defaulted to the 1983-84 Edmonton Oilers, who set a untouchable all-time record of 36 shorthanded goals in a season. You alluded to this team in your post. You noted that Wayne Gretzky had 12 goals and 11 assists on the penalty kill that year, 23 points. And I looked it up. Only 3 teams in NHL history, not named Edmonton Oilers, have ever scored 23 shorthanded goals in a season. Entire teams. Gretzky had 23 points shorthanded this year. Anyway, that year the Oilers were 7th in the league in PK percentage, 79.7%. But when you look at net PK percentage, lo and behold, Edmonton Oilers number one, 89.2%, because they scored almost one shorty for every 2 power play goals they gave up.
You know what, Bruce? I think you're right. Like I concede this argument like right now. That's the superior way to rate, and I'm gonna go change my chart. Won't change the post, but I'll repost with these new numbers because you're dead right. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
They crushed it. Every year they scored 26, 27 shorthanded goals, and then this one year, the year they set the 446 goals in one season record. That 36 of those goals came while they were down a man. It was just unbelievable how those guys how deadly they were on the counterattack. Now 88-89 that you referenced, they were still great. They scored, I think, 27 shorties that year without Gretzky, and Kurri and Tikkanen, especially, were phenomenal. I remember there was a game in Toronto in maybe early November that year, and this was after Gretzky's gone. We're all in eggshells saying, is our team just going to cave through the floor, or what's going to happen here? They went into Toronto, and Tikkanen set an NHL record, scoring 2 shorthanded goals in 12 seconds, both set up by Kurri, as the Oilers smoked the Leafs. And it was at that moment I kind of relaxed and went, you know what, this team is still pretty darn good. I think we're going to be competitive for a while yet. And of course they didn't win that year, but the next year they hung around and won the 5th Stanley Cup.
They were such great hockey players, Jari Kurri and Esa Tikkanen. They were so fabulous. Mm-hmm. And I hope that I think Nugent Hopkins has a chance to reach the level of a Tikkanen here. Maybe even like if he plays a full year with Draisaitl in the same line, he'll get that 100-point season, kind of a Curry-like level of scoring in a year. As a winger, like I was denigrating, not denigrating, but I was saying Draisaitl's a better center, and he is. But Nugent Hopkins is a fabulous winger in the NHL, and thank goodness that the Oilers have now tried him there, and he's got that chance. But he's a PK guy, power play guy, and he could be that winger, that quality of winger, that Ticket and Curry winger that the Oilers, really need on this team. And if Yamamoto can stay healthy, maybe he can be another one.
Well, after they moved him to wing, Nuge had 41 points in 30 games. So it's about a 110 point pace. Like that is elite high level scoring for an extended period of time.
So yeah, I'm going to redo my chart here. And I wonder how the 2019-20 will turn out, because they didn't score a lot of
They got
PK
three
goals.
shorties. Yeah, they dominated. They dominated in regular percentage on PK and power play, but they actually gave up 10 shorties and only scored 3. So that narrowed the gap a little bit. They were still plus 21 overall on special teams, but they were. It wasn't because of. It was for the shorthanded goal side of it. It was all for the. They scored on their power plays and they prevented the other team from scoring on theirs, and that was their strength. Now,
Here's
your
my
other question. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Here's my question to you, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
Would you do your ranking based on ranking in the NHL, percentage for the percentage ranking, the overall percentage ranking when you work in both goals against and goals for, or would you just do it? So would you do it on like where they ranked out of the 21 teams, or would you just use those raw percentage rankings, the final one that takes into account both stats, in order to rank it from 1 to
Well,
1 to 40?
I think the more more completest way of doing it, which is my sort of go-to, is to include the net. Uh, 83, 84. They scored 36. They allowed 77. Their shorthanded goal differential was minus 41, and their net percentage was first in the league. And to me, that tells me that if you, on balance overall, they were barely ahead of Washington Capitals.
Yeah,
Very,
but to
very
compare
good team.
eras, would you just go
Yeah,
with the net percentage to compare
uh,
eras? Would you think
net
that's the fair way to do it?
net percentage ranked within the league that season. Would be
So you would
my
go with okay. So if they're like you'd use the ranking. You wouldn't just use the raw percentage then to
right.
rank them. That's what I'm wondering. Like, so you're comparing the 1988-89 team compared to you're comparing this year's 29-20 team compared to the 87-88 team. Do you just use the raw percentage, or do you actually use the rank where they finished in the NHL? What do you think would be a superior way? Well, I guess we can talk about this,
Yeah, I
figure
would
this out later.
I would go with rank within the league, but I would use the rank of net
Yeah, yeah.
percentage.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's my
Alrighty. Well, any thoughts on this PK? Why it's so good? Because it was really good. Like, however they're going to finish in the order rankings all time, but this was damn good.
well, some of it was goaltending.
Yeah.
There's only I looked at this a while back, but as I recall, there was 52 goalies who played 25 or more games in the NHL, and only 6 of them had a penalty kill save percentage higher than 900, and 2 of them were Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. So the Oilers had, 2 goalies that were way above average on the penalty kill. So you could say the goaltending was lights out. That's why the penalty killing did well. Or you could say the penalty killing did a better job of cutting down those killer cross-seam passes for the one-time bombs from the opposite circle, that they didn't give up too many 5-bill chances, that the goalie actually had a chance to stop more pucks, and they did stop more pucks. So I think it's a little of column A and a little of column B. Goalies played well. I'm not sure how sustainable it's going to be. I'm not confident saying next year we're going to have a top 3 penalty killing team. I'm pretty confident to say the power play is still going to be really good. But the penalty kill, I mean, they did cut out those cross seam passes. I mean, how many times, David, did you and I look at scoring chances on a goal against, and we would see Zach Kassian and Mark Letestu both beaten by the same pass from the guy on the right point to the guy in the left circle, would bomb home a one-time drive before the goalie could get across. How many times did we see that? Too many times.
My most desperate moment of last season. This was cross desperation. This is when two trains of desperation collide in the night. It was the Milan Lucic desperation. Like like, what were they going to do with him? How could he ever help the Oilers win? Colliding with the terrible PK.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, maybe he's Lucic is like Matt Hendricks, and Matt Hendricks was kind of slow and big, but he was a good PK guy. And then I thought maybe that would, avoid the collision. But anyway, or what I don't, my metaphor is a little bit strained. But I just thought, I was thinking Milan Lucic on the PK. That's how desperate I was about both situations. I was they were so bad, and Cassian was
Mhm.
such a big part of it. And you pointed this out a few times last year with his lack. One of the stats that really showed, like, he had like 3 block shots all year
Yeah,
on the PK. Like, what are you doing out there? Like,
yeah.
this is one of the things that forwards do now. They block shots. And like Zach Cassian, he's a tough, really good hockey player, but
Hmm.
he was not a PK guy, and he couldn't make the reads. The passes would go
Yeah,
through him all. Like, that puck was pinballing around
yeah.
triangularly, like angling around the other zone last year like crazy. So I'm of the mind that it was cutting out the angle passes. And one other thing that happened, I think Oscar Clefbaum really improved as a defensive player on the PK. He's getting smarter, and he's been on these special teams a lot. And we've talked about how he's got smarter on the power play. I think he got a
Hmm.
lot smarter on the PK and was starting to make really good reads and playing hockey. If he stays healthy, Oscar Clefbaum, man, we are going to see some fantastic hockey from this player in the next 3 years.
Yeah, well, his we talk about block shots, and of course they are the whipping boy of the fancy stats community, to say the least. They're like the sacrifice bunts of hockey, and they are decried. I mean, Kent Wilson had a famous analysis where he said, uh, blocking shots is like killing rats. It's better to do it than not do it. But if you find yourself doing it all the time, chances are you've got a bigger problem. Uh, and he was talking about Chris Russell, then of the Calgary Flames, when he said that. Uh, but to me, I mean, it is a very dubious stat. But what it tells me, with a guy like Zach Cass, has basically close to zero. You wonder if the guy is ever in the shooting lane. You know, I mean, if you're just in your position in the shooting lane, you're going to block some shots, and it's it's a lousy stat, but there's no stats for being in passing lanes, being in shooting lanes. So you can derive a little bit from that. The guys that block the most tend to be in the lanes the most often. And that's where Oscar Klefbom shines by that metric, and Zach Cassian does not. Well, Oscar Klefbom was kept on the penalty kill this year, and Zach Cassian was not. And due respect to Cassian, I know the coach would like to see him on one of the other special teams, but I think the right decision was made.
Do you know anyone who, I'm just looking at the NHL block shot stats, and Clefbaum led the team with 180 in
Led the
62
league.
games? Led the league, he did, eh? Okay.
Hmm.
Nurse 141 in 71 games, Bear 106, Russell 101.
Hmm.
Um, and I think all of those players were key power penalty killers.
Yes.
Um, does anyone break? I can't see on NHL.com where they break it out for shorthanded situations. Do you know any
Oh,
site that does? Does any site? Maybe.
I'm not. I'm sure that data could be scraped. I'm not sure anyone does because, as mentioned, the fancy stats community that does scraping type things tends to devalue or countervalue block shots as a
You know who doesn't
metric.
devalue block shots, Bruce?
Hmm.
NHL coaches,
Coaches.
NHL players.
Hmm.
You know what? That's who doesn't devalue them. Like, and I know, like, you can say whatever you want about it, but come on. In the playoffs, are those winning teams blocking shots? Is that a huge feature of their game?
Hmm.
Yes, it is a huge
Sometimes
feature
it
of their
sure
game.
can be for sure.
Now I know, there was studies done, and I don't know when more if there's been done more recently that there was no strong correlation between block shots and winning. So fair enough.
Oh,
But if you don't block shots, you ain't gonna win. How about that? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if you didn't block any shots, you'd win. What do you think? But I'm saying the teams, it's part of the game, and it's a big. I think it's part of winning. I think it's part of winning hockey. So how do you square that with it's not correlated? I don't know. I have to look at it more closely.
well, Oscar Klefbom, 180 block shots, and this was with missing 9 games. David Savard 163, Alexander Edler 162, and Edler's a guy I kind of see some Edler in Clefbaum. Just kind of an
Similar.
all-round guy that doesn't dominate in any one area, but it's been a darn good player for a darn long time, right? And obviously Clefbaum's quite a few years younger and has a ways to go, but they're kind of all-purpose guys, and so that's a complimentary comparison coming from me at least. And they so he's uh, that number is picking up, and sometimes it's not necessarily the big hard physical hitting guys that block a lot of shots. Tom Gilbert used to block a ton of shots, and it was just by being in the lane and not flinching and taking the odd one off the ankle, but being in the way and giving the other guys something to a bumper to have to get the puck by. And to me, it has defensive value, and often it's just simply a null play. The other team tries a shot, your team blocks it, or vice versa, where it's like a battle that gets sawed off. It's neither won or lost, other than it tells you that which team has the puck and which end of the ice it's in. And the team that's blocking more shots because they're getting more shots fired against them, well, then that's probably not a good sign.
Just seeing if natural stat trick hits. Oh, they do shots. They do it, Bruce.
Yeah.
Here,
good stuff.
let's just call
team?
up. By team. So let's go. Let's go. We'll have a live data search here. Penalty kill, and we'll go for the Oilers for this year only. And of course, it's going to take a little while. I would say Ken Holland did also a pretty good job of acquiring some forwards to fill in for Zach Cassian, so they no longer had to play him in that particular role. So we want rates. Right. And Josh Archibald and Riley Sheahan were the two of the top guys taking up ice time. And here we go. Oilers PK. Hits per 60 on the PK. Shot blocks per 60 on the PK. Okay. Darnell Nurse. This is per 60 minutes of PK time. 11.8. Right. Mm-hmm. Adam Larson. 11. Oscar Clefbaum. 10.4. No, that's Matt Benning. 10.4. Oscar Clefbaum. 10.1. Ethan Bear. Ethan Bear 8.0. Chris Russell, the lowest of the defensemen who had a lot of PK time.
Real.
Isn't that fascinating? So we're just trying to. I'm going to have to try to understand these numbers, compare them to other years. But who would have guessed that?
I think Chris Russell was playing different this year, and I think with a coaching tandem of Jim Playfair and Dave Tippett may have had something to do with that. That he was doing a little less of the selling out hero play stuff, to my eye.
Well, were they playing the lanes more? Like maybe it was play the lane, not the shot. I don't know. Like what I noticed them doing all year, and I don't notice they did it. Like they'd let you pass. Like they would just really focus on that inside pass, like blocking that, taking the angle to the defenseman so they can't make that angled pass. That was the forwards doing it. Maybe the D were doing that as well. That's really interesting. So we'll have to look over time at Chris Russell's stats on that and get back to you guys on that and what the numbers are and what they mean, what we can make sense of them meaning at least.
Okay. Well, I can get on a team basis. This would be brute force to get the whole thing, but the Oilers, the other teams attempted 608 shots. And 459 of them were not blocked. So you can, about 25% of the shot attempts against them were blocked. And that looks to be maybe a little high, but really about average for other teams.
We'll have to compare it to other years too.
Yes.
So I'll be digging into that now. I know I was trying to think, where am I going to go with this? But this looks like a real rich area to look at because that is one stat that's a big stat on the PK. It's there may not be a bigger, takeaways, but really, do they do many takeaways? It's more like tips.
No, it's too much. No, you need a one-on-one battle, and when it's 4-on-5, you can't commit.
You know what I
You're
love
always
is
containing as opposed to, going taking on a guy one on
yeah.
one. So I don't think takeaways shorthanded it would yield a lot of data.
Now, what I love is tip pucks in the defensive zone,
Yes.
shorthanded. How many times did you tip a puck? That will be a really useful stat, and I wonder if NHL teams keep those stats. I bet you some of them do. Well, Bruce, I got to run. Dr. Dina Hinshaw's on the TV
All
soon,
right.
so I'm gonna
Okay.
have to ask her a question. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, well, I'm gonna ask them about.
Alberta's most trusted public figure,
I'm gonna ask
Dr.
them
Dina
about.
Hinshaw.
I'm gonna ask them if the NHL's come to town, or what it would take. What
Yeah.
are the
Yeah. Frame
hurdles?
frame it
What
right.
are the
Yeah.
hurdles that have to be crossed for this to happen, in their opinion? That's what I'm gonna ask. Does that sound like a good question? Maybe.
It
I don't know.
does.
We'll see. All right. Thanks.
It does. It kind of marries your two thrusts between being a hockey blogger and, of course, a public interest reporter. And it's absolutely a legitimate question. It's one aspect of society that people clearly want to see get going again. And judging from the feedback we continue to get from our readers and listeners, people miss hockey, man. I know I
And
do.
and at the journal site now, Bruce,
Hmm.
the hockey stories in the first 2 or 3 weeks, hardly anyone was reading the hockey stories that we were writing. In this last 2 weeks, our stories are again getting huge readership, as much
That's
read as
great.
probably every story, any story. So people love their Edmontonians love their Oilers, and so do we. All right, talk to you later.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Bruce.
listening, everyone. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between time, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.